So, Matthew, the last thing I would ask you is about quality and training. And as you mentioned, there are two kinds of agents. It's a demanding job on either side. How do you continue to invest in this very demanding category with high churn um, um, and lots of knowledge to deal with? What do your investments in quality and training look like? What do you plan in the future? What tools do you like, and so on?
Yeah, it's training is huge. If you do not, typically training is one of those training, workforce, QA, HR, payroll, all of your organizations on the side of support, on the side of sales, on the side like your supports within your company. Those are always the last ones invested in, right? Training falls in that too. But your training team, one, sets the tone for your culture, which you will then either fight or fuel the entire journey of the employee. The other one is they set the benchmark for how much skill gap that your supervisor team needs to fill. Every operation, just like every team, has a weak point, right? Like if you have a football team, it's our special teams. It's not so good, so let's try and avoid being in situations where we have to use our special teams. If I have younger, less experienced supervisors, or I have 30 supervisors and therefore my span of control is more challenging, then the gap within training is my weak point. It is absolutely going to be the pain point within my operation. So the biggest investment that you can make in your training is not a tool, it's not a system, it's the time of your trainers and your content writers to continuously reevaluate your content and make sure it's delivering what your team needs today. Like every class should almost get a slightly augmented training from the prior class. That's by far the most expensive because it's about 40 hours of content writing time for 1 hour of training time.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's a big cost there, right? Well, from there, then I need to measure the impact, also identify where the opportunity is. So we're looking at, obviously turnover rates is a big one within the economics, but you need to define what is your date of proficiency. What is the speed in which this employee has now hit the full performance contribution that you budgeted for that FTE, basically. That they're hitting that handle time, talk time, call time, occupancy, and then adherence. So you're getting your full value out of how many days is that? And then start working on backing that thing up, right? So when I started at OpenTable, we were at 187 days it took for an employee to get to proficiency. We got to 87 before the pandemic from constantly gathering feedback and attaching training or updating training based off of feedback. And then also as the products changed, hey, we don't have to train on this now. What are we going to focus this time on instead? When you do get in, like when are talking about systems, there's a ton of different systems out there, learning and management systems. Honestly, it's one of the most crowded spaces because there's always been remote training, especially for sales orgs. But it's the ones that really allow the interaction. A lot of times organizations forget that these are adult educational learners, right? You can't put them in a classroom for 8 hours and expect them to retain the information. You got to break it up. It's got to be interactive. It's got to be bite-sized. They have to do it. They have to then come back and they have to test that. And I think some of the best training programs are the ones where you go, you do some of the work, you then get on the floor, take that contact, come back, discuss. Now let's apply the next learning. It's complex and you need a workforce team that can hold up with that, but it's a much better adoption rate. Then your team flourishes and they go on. And also your retention of your first 90 days employees is way higher. But it's critical.
One thing you mentioned there, so is this like, it's a light bulb went off from 187 days to 87 days to get to proficiency. That's a phenomenal change. And as you mentioned there, the speed at which we get feedback, where sort of QA comes in, right? If we can improve the coverage of QA, and this is not to talk about level AI here, but we can improve the coverage of QA and also give them more automated feedback in a rapid way. This is a key metric to influence, right? And to reduce churn. And often people make that sort of do not appreciate that gap between churn and QA and training. Right, and sort of automation of QA and so on could really help you as well.
The most valuable skill set that, I don't even know if skill set's the right word, but the most valuable thing that a CSR could bring to a conversation.
Yeah.
It's not the ability to root cause, it's not the ability to talk, it's not the ability to listen, it's even forwarding or any of that, just it's confidence. If you're confident, the customer will accept your solution. That's what it takes to get them off the phone, right? And that's what drives the economics of the business.
Right.
And if your training is subpar, they're not going to be confident for a long time. If your training makes them feel like they have the power to answer the questions, if not find the answer, and that's generally what your training is, how to seek the answer. Or that the other part of it too is that your support system, once they hit the floor, right, that you have enough coverage, enough leadership coverage so that they're not left alone waiting 20 minutes to get an answer to their question. That's going to degrade their confidence and degrade it in the leadership team. But if they have confidence, they're going to be fine. In fact, they're going to flourish. So that's really what you're looking to do. QA is coming in is to identify where there's confidence gaps. Knowledge gaps, yes, but it's the confidence of it. And that's where those are going to be the things that you role play in training. Those are going to be the calls that you do, like ghost calls and test calls. And these are the ones we're going to make sure we quiz on. Because these are the calls that we're hearing the most. 1 are the longest, 2 are the most repeat contacts, 3 the notes are shaky, and 4 the customer or the agent, they flourished. You can hear it in their voice, the inflection of their voice. And then you'll see it in the CSAT score. 7. You're never getting a 10 on that one. You're going to get a 7 at best because they can tell. They can tell when the customer doesn't have confidence, so they don't have faith that you're delivering. But that's me where QA really comes about, is driving that training, always trying to get to how do we deliver it faster? How do we flush out what they don't need to know during training, what they do need to know, right? Like you don't need to know how to answer every single call. You need to know how to find the answer to the call.
Very interesting.